So, hello everybody. I am very happy to record this session, except that it's a bit difficult for me because I like to look at people. I like to see their reaction, and here I will really miss your presence. But it's better than nothing. So let's go. And let's enter into this subject, which is how to estimate density probability on a spider web. So it's a title which is a bit provocative. And my talk will be divided into two parts. The first part will be basically applied on the spider web, and the second part will be mostly theoretical, trying to justify what are the procedures that we will adopt for estimating a density in a spider web. So let's look at a spider web. So I will give you some pictures of spider web. So first, these pictures are taken from an exhibition which took part in Paris 1.5 years ago. It was a very, very, very interesting exhibition about spiders. And there were spider webs, but very, very large one. I mean, like 5 meters large. And I want you to see that because, as we will see, spider webs may have very different parts. As you can see here, there is this. I don't know. Yes, I hope you can see my finger. You have this part which are kind of homogeneous, and this part also. So you have different parts in a spider web which are homogeneous inside each part, but the parts are very different. So this is basically the kind of object that we are trying to consider. This is a medium we are trying to consider. So this is another example. So and this is the beast. So for the people who hate spiders, I would just like to say that at the beginning I was hating spiders, and also I was very afraid of these animals. But if you enter into their life, you can see that they are very, very intelligent. And now I have a lot of respect with these animals. And so I put a cartoon spider to get you to consider them in a more gentle way. This is a very very cartoon way of looking at spiders, because in this representation, the spiders have very big eyes. This is absolute nonsense, because in fact, spiders have very, very small eyes, and even some species of spiders have no eyes at all. So one thing that it's very important about spiders is that they don't see. They are almost blind. And what is important is that, in fact, they see with the help of their spider web. So they feel. It's a very geometrical animal. They feel the atmosphere. They see just by the vibration of their webs. So there are big questions about spiders which are not entirely solved. One among them is, what is the use of this different form in their webs? You see that there is different form, and could we consider that these different forms are there to help them to apprehend their medium, in fact to see? Or are these different forms adapted to catch prey? Because of course spiders, they have to eat, and they catch prey in their web. And so it would be important to know whether some places are more adapted to catch prey, and other places are more adapted to help the animal to have an idea of the medium in which is evolving. So the idea of density estimation in a spider web is not completely out of the blue. It's just to try to identify the zones where the prey are falling most often. So that's why we will try to have this density and to try to solve the density estimation problem. So first, I will give you an estimator for this problem, a practical one. And afterwards, I will try to justify these estimators using theoretical tools. Okay, so what is the density problem? So everybody is used to it. We observe x1, xn, which are IID random variable defined on the space M. So here the space is a spider web. So it's a complicated place. Okay, they have a common density. So this complicated place M is equipped with a distance and with a measure, since we want to have a density. And our aim is to identify this density. Okay? So first, we will identify the spider web with a graph. So we identify it with a graph. It means a simple graph, undirected with no loops, with T vertices and some edges. Associated with a graph, it's completely common to have the adjacency matrix, which is very simple. Aij is just equal to 1 if there is an edge between the vertex I and the vertex j, and 0 otherwise. There are more complicated adjacency matrix, but we'll just look at this one. And M is also naturally equipped with a distance, which is a geodesic distance, which is the smallest path that you can have to link the vertex I to the vertex j, which is this definition, but this is completely classical. Okay? Then there is another thing that can be calculated and is usually calculated, and it's not only for people in graph theory, it's also calculated, for instance, in cluster, in finding cluster. Associated with a graph, you have a graph Laplacian, which is just, there are various forms of graph Laplacian. We'll take this one. So it's just L with a T by T matrix, which is the difference between D and A. So A is the adjacency matrix we were speaking of, and L is the degree matrix. The degree matrix is just a diagonal matrix where you put on the diagonal the popularity of each vertex, mean the number of people which are connected with it. Okay. So here, when you have this graph and when you have this L, then you can have the spectral decomposition of L. I mean, you can have its T eigenvalues. We order them just for convenience. And the Vt, the Vi, Vj eigenvectors associated to the lambda j. And each eigenvector, of course, is in the space R to the T. And what is our estimate? Our estimator will be k hat of x at point x, depending on delta. So delta will be a bandwidth. We will see it later, the way to choose it, for instance. And this is this sum. So there is a sum here, which can look like something barbare. So there is 1/n sum for I equals 1 to n. This is completely classical. And here, what is this thing? This thing is a Littlewood-Paley function. It's basically a function which is, you can see as being either 0 or 1. So it's 1 between 0 and half, and is 0 outside, except that it is extremely smooth. So it's not 0 and 1, it's going from 1 to 0, but very, very, very smoothly because it's infinity. Okay? And then you put here the eigenvectors, the VJs, and you put it at xi, which is the observation, and at point x, which is the point where you are making this estimation. So you can see this is very simple to calculate. This is at the beginning, if you imagine a spider web, it's a very complicated thing, but at the end, this estimator is not very complicated. There is the complicated thing is to calculate these eigenvectors, I agree, but apart from this is a completely simple thing, standard thing. So let's come now to the theoretical part. We will, so I gave you an estimator in this example of the spider web. Now I have to justify why to take this estimator. Why will you believe me that it's important to do that? So this is this theory is issued from a joint work with the people which are written here. So there is a lot of people, and it's already appeared in the Bernoulli journal, so you can find the proof. But I will try to give you some indication about the proof. So setting and motivation. So we start with a metric space M, with a distance rho, with a measure mu, and we observe x1, xn, which are IID, random variable on M, with a common density. Our purpose is to estimate the density, and we have an estimator f at n of f. And as usual, we associate its risk, which is the classical LP risk, okay? Even L infinity risk. And we will operate in a setting, a setting about this M, this space, which is borrowing a lot of things which have been done in an harmonic analysis framework, and basically in 2 papers by Coulon, Karkasharian, and Petrouchev. So I refer to these papers. So what are the conditions? Because we need to have conditions, of course. Even if we are in RD, we have conditions, even we have the dimension. So first, we will set the dimension. What is the dimension in this kind of situation? It can be set through a condition which is classical in harmonic analysis, which is a doubling condition. What is a doubling condition? Doubling condition just means that if you take a ball of center x and of radius 2r, and you want to control its measure by mu, to control it by the measure of the same ball but of radius r. Then you say that you have a so-called doubling volume condition if you can control by the same constant for all x and all r the volume of the ball of radius 2r. Basically, this means that, in fact, if you replace this 2 by a lambda, then you have a behavior which is that the measure of the ball of reduced x and center x and reduced lambda r is controlled by lambda to the d, the measure of the ball of center x and reduced r. And this d, of course, you can have a lot of d, but the least d that suggests this is true is called the homogeneous dimension of M. And this will set our dimension. And as everybody knows, the dimension is something very important in statistics because it's controlling and it's damaging a lot the rate of convergence. We also will operate in a slightly more restrictive conditions. We will assume that M is compact. Not everywhere, but in some part of the paper, we assume that we not only have this bound, that means that the volume of the ball of reduced R is less than some constant R to the D, but we also assume that we have a lower bound, saying that in fact, all the balls of reduced R are behaving more or less like R to the D. This is not necessarily always the case. We will not assume always, but sometimes we will assume this condition, and this name is Alfors regular volume condition. It's important to realize that to the fact that if we have this, then we have something which is quite natural. We have a control of the metric entropy. So it's not completely bizarre. It's just a condition which is very much linked with metric entropy. So now let's come again to spider webs and try to build an operator. Try to build an estimator. To build an estimation theory, basically we need two parts. We need to speak about regularity, and we need to construct something like a kernel. If we look at the standard method in density estimation, I mean in RD or in R, generally, we build an estimator which is of this form. So we have something which is K indexed by D of Xi and X. And in RD, an important family for this is the translation kernel. The problem is that if you consider spaces M, which are what they are, maybe the simple operation of translation and dilation might not be meaningful. If you are in a spider web, what does it mean to translate? What does it mean to dilate? Nothing. So we have to do something else. The second thing is that when we deal with the kernel estimation method, generally what we do is that we divided what we want to evaluate, the loss of the estimation, into two terms. One term is the stochastic part, and one term is the bias. Okay? So when we come back to RD and when K is a translation kernel, then we know that polynomial rates of approximation of the bias part are obtained with Bezoff regularity. Here we try to do the same. Here, so an important issue is to find space of regularity associated to possibly complex sets. Of course, we can always do Lipschitz spaces, because Lipschitz spaces can always be evaluated as soon as you have a distance. The problem with Lipschitz spaces is that they just allow regularity up to 1. If we want to go further, then we need something else. When M is a set where there is no obvious notion of differentiability, one can think about Riemannian manifold, because in Riemannian manifold, there is something which is linked with differentiability, which is the Laplacian. The Laplacian is an operator of order 2, but its square root is of order 1, and it can be interpreted as a substitute. No, it's not a derivation, it can be associated with a substitute for derivation. So now let's go with some assumption. So we had this space M with a distance and a measure, and we will also assume that this is complemented by a self-adjoint non-negative operator, L, which in our spider web was the graph Laplacian. So we assume that we have in addition a non-negative operator L, mapping real value to real valued function, such that the associated semigroup, which is the exponential of minus TL, which is, well, it can seem a bit annoying, but it's, if you imagine that L has a discrete spectrum, that this operator is just the sum over all k. K is the number of eigenvalues of e to the power minus t lambda k. Lambda k is the eigenvalues, pk of xy, and pk of xy is just a projection on the eigenspace associated with the eigenvalues lambda k. Okay? So what do we assume? We assume that this, so we have this operator, okay, and we'll assume something about it. So we need some assumption, obviously, it's not working all the time. So we assume that we have a control of this operator like a Gaussian operator. A Gaussian operator would be exactly like that. So this is the distance between x and y. And so you have this control, and this is the measure of the ball, center in x, and of radius square root of t, and the same for the ball, center in y, and square root of t as a radius. We assume that we have also Hölder continuity. We have also a Markov property. I will not insist about this property. They are coming from the paper by Coulon, Karkasharian, and Petrouchev. And now we consider regularity classes. So what are regularity classes? We consider sigma u, which is the sum of the eigenspaces associated with all the eigenvalues, such that the eigenvalues is less than u squared. Okay? And then we consider the space of function which are approximated by function of this kind of function with a polynomial rate of convergence u to the power minus s. So this is, if you think about Bezoff, Bezoff regularity. This is basically Bezoff regularity, except that it's in a more involved kind of space. In fact, the people in harmonic analysis are also able to develop a wavelet which characterize this kind of regularity spaces. So, typical example, I will give you quite quickly because I don't have a lot of time. So, if you take RD, then you take the classical Laplacian, then minus the classical Laplacian because we want a positive operator. Then we have this, and we have exactly that. We have that the kernel is of this form, so we have exactly a bound, of course. But we can take m equals to -1, 1, and then we take L of f equals minus f squared, f second, and we get this. We can take a sphere, and we get the as spaces of eigenspaces, the spherical harmonics. But you can take things which are quite more involved, like Lie group of matrices, like SU2, which are in fact it's not going also from nowhere. It's coming from in astrophysical problem when instead of looking at the radius of the microwave background, you receive the polarization of this radiation. Then you observe something which naturally is in SU2. Then you have also this, you can also have this theory. Now let's come to the construction of a kernel density estimator. The construction of a kernel density estimator, it's very much linked to what we do if we consider, for instance, kernel in a periodic case when m equals to -1, 1. A commonly admitted estimator would be to take this one. So you take the cos, and you take cos k pi x minus xi, and you take the sum up to t. And then the estimator is depending on t. Well, we know that this is an orthogonal theory estimator. It is well known that these estimators have nice L2 property, but they fail in LP. So what to do? To get them have better property in LP, one thing that we can do is to smooth a little bit. Instead of doing something very abrupt here, we can smooth this. So we put here a function which is going from 1 to 0, but very smoothly, and put it here. And this will give you an estimator which will have good property in LP. Here we'll do the same. In analogy with this, we have M, we have the operator minus L, and we will define this estimator, which is, let's look at this. This is a sum of phi. So this is this function between 0 and 1, going from 1 to 0 very smoothly. Depending on delta, delta will be the bandwidth. Lambda k will be the eigenvalues of the estimator. And here it's the projector. Okay? So this is an estimator. This is exactly corresponding to what we were doing in the case of the spider web. Okay? So this is in this case. So now just for the example that I showed you just a little bit before, you can see that this can be calculated quite easily because we know the eigenvalues and we know the projection. For the sphere, for SU2 also, So it's not a very complicated object. Now, what are the results? The results are the following. We have upper bound result, and we'll just prove here upper bound result because the lower bound result in the case, well, I will speak about it a little bit later. So what are the upper bound result? What you obtain? You obtain, as usual, two terms. One term is the bias term, and one term is the stochastic term, which is depending on the bandwidth to the power d. So remember, d was given by the metric entropy, the doubling condition, and you have this, which is quite usual, and this is without any condition. This is true for p between 2 and infinity. If p is between 1 and 2, then to prove the same thing, we need to assume that the support of f is included into a ball, whatever it is, center it to x naught and radius r. And then we have the same kind of bound, except that we have here the length, the measure of the ball. But we have also the bias term and the variance term. Then if we assume that p is equal to infinity, then we have also the same kind of term, except that here we don't have you could think that we don't have a log term. In fact, we do have a log term, but we have a q here, which you can choose, and then if you choose it in the right way, you will get a logarithmic term. Okay. So if we want to have minimax type result, then we just need to take delta to be equal to n to the power minus 1 over 2s plus d. Then we get exactly the kind of result that we get there. So as you can see, delta is depending, the bandwidth is depending on the regularity. And this, of course, is not suitable. So we can have, we can look at adaptation method. So there are how to do it. Basically, we can think of various adaptation methods, but we can think about Levsky's method, about penalization Bayesian method, about waveless thresholding. In fact, in that case, we chose waveless thresholding. We are still working on adaptation using Levsky's method, and I will comment about it a little bit. But we got adaptation also with Bayesian method, with in other previous paper with Ismael Castillo. But it was not exactly the same result because it was in a Bayesian context. But we find, and it was assuming Alfor's condition. But in fact, we find exactly the same method. But here I wanted to emphasize that in the case where we get Alfor's condition, I mean, in the case where all the balls are behaving like R to the D, are measured behaving like R to the D, then we have a wavelet construction, which is coming from the people in harmonic analysis, and we can do waveless thresholding as usual, and we obtain the result, the minimax result with logarithmic term, of course. I just want to comment a little bit more about adaptation and maybe Levsky's method. The problem is that when you assume, I want to go back to this web. So here is the web. Just I will finish on it. The web is interesting because, as you can see, it's a very non-homogeneous thing. It's probably here you have a doubling condition with some D. Here we have a doubling condition with another D. And if you assume a force condition, then you assume that all the regions you have the same D. But if you are in such a context, then you don't have the same D everywhere. And in that case, we don't have the answer. We don't know if the results we have are minimax. Probably they are not. And probably you need to take into account the behavior of the media where you are when you want to do adaptation. So I think that it's important to see that in this problem, not only the function itself, but the density itself, but the medium is going to enter into the game and give you different dimensions. And so I think it's a new challenge that we will have. And I wanted to finish with this question. So I thank you very much for your attention.